Yo, beautiful people in the world. Hey, thanks for jumping on and joining the channel again. So I want to talk to you about something that is actually going to end up turning into a series on here, and I'll have it under a different label and all that good stuff for you, so it's all easily categorized. But part of the reason why I started this channel was to really focus in and hone in on the biblical side of Neville's work. And as somebody who is trained in biblical Hebrew, biblical Greek, and has gotten the amazing opportunity to hang out with rabbis and to learn Kabbalah for the last 3 years, and also jump into the Hebrew symbolic nature of Scripture. I think it's extremely powerful, and the deeper that we go into understanding Scripture, then you'll actually begin to unravel why it was written the way it was written and why some of the verses don't make crap sense at all. And you're like, I don't get it. Like, it's not relevant to me. But what's really cool is that the deeper that you go, not only will you discover super awesome perspectives about how this being or this source or love or God or imagination sees you, but also what you're capable of, and also way more techniques than even Neville himself taught. So I think it's extremely important that we do this because we see a deeper value in this. And so again, I'm going to be coming at this less academically. Yes, most of my training is in, academic understanding of these terms, but a lot of my training in the last few years has been hyper-focused around studying Neville and Neville's approach and reading the books that he's himself read. So, sorry, I sound like Porky Pig then. So, why don't we jump into that? And I chose a really, really obscure passage, kind of on purpose, because when we read it, we're like, it doesn't make sense literally, let alone historically. But if you're new to Neville and the Bible, then, or even if you're not, then first and foremost, let's kind of like set a foundation, which is to say that the Bible is not historical. So you're not going out looking for Israel or whether King David existed or was Jesus buried in the Shroud of Turin, all of this kind of stuff. Now, if that's something that makes you come alive and it really excites you, then go ahead. I mean, I to each their own. It doesn't matter to me. But, as somebody who grew up with the Bible and as somebody who grew up initially in Christianity, I realized that we have a culture, especially in the West, that is predominantly influenced by a historical version of Christianity. And that doesn't mean you're wrong if you hold both, right? It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you if you say, well, I actually believe there was a real dude named Jesus, or I don't. It doesn't matter in one sense, because the whole idea of trying to understand Scripture is to learn how to become better humans as gods, but also better manifestors and just better overall humans, right? So again, take that as you will. But why don't we jump into this? I'm not going to share the actual word for word verse right now, but I will share that in the notes below. And it's Deuteronomy 13, verses 14 and 15. And the first section of that, the verse 14, is about searching out. Now, that's very, very important. The Hebrew word is sharach, right? And what you end up with if you keep going deeper. So in the Hebrew language, in as much as most languages, except ironically English, is that there usually tends to be layers. So like sometimes, for example, like there's 7 or 8 different meanings for a particular idea within the Hebrew language. And when it comes to the idea of searching, it's similar. Maybe not as many as 7. I think it's like 4 or 5. And then there's also root. There's also roots, as in the base word that is combined with another word to make the word that we call search. Or which, if you look at the kind of basic understanding of that word, you might get the word investigate, right? As in like a Nancy Drew kind of thing. But there's actually more to it. So the deeper you go, you get the word penetrate. Okay. Yes, you can take it as some sort of sexual metaphor. It actually still works anyways when you understand that the Bible's a psychological document. And Neville actually, if you've read him, you know that he actually uses the word penetrate. Okay. And that's very, very important. Okay. Because what he says in his particular context is that we're being penetrated day in and day out. Now, if that word upsets you or you're like, I don't get it, it makes me feel uncomfortable, it makes me feel dirty. Okay. Well, then, really, really what you want to do is you want to understand that word to mean I'm impacted by something. I'm influenced by something. Something is actually changing my mental or emotional space and is having me interpret my feelings in an unhelpful way. Okay, so that's really what it means to be penetrated. All right. But for the sake of this conversation, let's just say influenced or impacted. Okay. But why would a verse dedicate itself to talk about being psychologically impacted, right? Because when you look at the two sets of verses, it kind of doesn't make sense. It does and it doesn't. And so when you look at it, this will actually make way more sense. So what it's talking about is, again, back to this idea of penetration or being impacted. So you have to do the work of searching out and going into your mind and saying, what is impacting me? Why is it impacting me? Okay. Now, this is what I find so interesting, because sometimes, especially even in manifesting circles, that's almost even discouraged, because like, no, just focus on this, right? Especially law of attraction, just focus on the good, just hyper focus on, right? Just only feeling good. Okay. This is actually saying what you should be doing is you should be actively searching out, right? You should be actively being aware of what impacts you. So there's a technique right there. Being actively aware is, hey, if I'm reading the news all the time on my phone and that's really throwing me off, I need to get rid of it, right? Or hey, if I'm always around a particular group of people and every time I walk away, I feel dirty, icky, or really easily distracted or whatever it is, then find ways in which to spend time less with them. Manifest better friends, whatever it is, right? So again, even in one verse right now, we've already actually discovered that within the Bible, they're hinting at things. They're actually giving us coordinates for being better at being God, right? So the second verse is also very interesting. Then it talks about destroying a city. Okay, now remember, and Neville explains this, the city is a metaphor for a state. Okay, so for your collective beliefs and values and perceptions of your current state, and also your ability to move states, right? All of those things, that's a city. So when it says to destroy a city, that makes more sense, because otherwise it's just talking about genocide, right? It's just talking about destroying other people for the sake of destroying other people, which that's not cool. So then it also talks about destroying livestock. This is very key. This is actually a really cool symbolic breakdown of when you read about animals. Now notice especially a lot in the Old Testament. There's loads of different verses that talk about animals and also untamed animals. Okay. So animals are metaphor for your emotional perceptions, for the way that you see and feel things. So they're actually a combination of the two. Okay. So when it says, and destroy your livestock, okay, what literally within these two verses, it's a handbook on saying, hey, listen, there are emotions and states that you want to destroy, which obviously, for the sake of this conversation, it's your old state, right? It's the old emotion. Destroy the livestock, right? What that means is get rid of the emotions, okay, that are limiting you. Get rid of the beliefs. Get rid of the values. Get rid of the perception. All of those are separate things, by the way. So I don't really like how a lot of people, especially in the manifesting world, even in Neville's world, how they just use the word state. That's not a helpful way to understand this, okay? Because then you're not actually doing the work that is required to be able to take this to the next advanced level, okay? And so, yes, you can manifest if you don't do it fully, of course. But why? Why would you want, or why wouldn't you want to actually do the extra work of, hey, you know what? There's still some beliefs here that are kind of hanging around, and they're reinforced by some emotions, and they're reinforced by memories, which is a state, by the way. Those are the three elements of a state, and I break that down in my other video on states. So I wanted to jump on here. There's actually more to this, and you could probably hear me wanting to talk about it, but I don't want to make these too long. So keep in mind, the Bible's talking to the mind, but it's talking to the mind, not the ego. So even Neville says that the Bible is written to the inner self, as a guidebook for the inner self. So read that from now on if you jump in and you read scripture, right? And if it's part of your daily practice, amazing. But now try to look at it from Neville's perspective. And I'm going to be doing more of these so that you actually get a better grasp on this. And I'm happy to share resources. Most of my resources are Neville's, inclusive of my 3-year Kabbalah course that I'm still on, and many other resources like the Tanakh and, Hebrew to English breakdowns and stuff. So thank you all for taking the time to jump on. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Please share this video with at least one person today. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, and be safe in the world. And don't forget to destroy the animals that are actually getting in your way. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.